Hello and welcome to the 20th Annual Gary Lincoff Foray. I'm Cecily Franklin, President of the Western Pennsylvania Mushroom Club. Our special guest today is Litt Woon, author of The Way Through the Woods on Mushrooms and Mourning. I received Woon's book for Christmas, and when I was done reading it, I found her Facebook page and I sent her a message. And we discussed how could we get her from Norway to Pittsburgh to speak at our Gary Lincoff Foray. And I think we could have gotten her as far as New York City, but I don't think she wanted to take the megabus to Pittsburgh all day the way Gary always did. So we gave up pretty quickly on that idea. But then COVID came along and changed everything. And Woon contacted me again to see if we could do something virtual. And after that, things fell into place with the help of a grant from Norla, which is Norwegian Literature Abroad. And now Woon is here after all. So Woon, welcome to the 20th Annual Gary Lincoff Foray.
Oh, thank you so much, Cecily. I'm so honored and I'm so happy to be with all of you.
Thank you. Now, like most of our members, you were a friend of Gary, and we're going to talk about him a lot today. But first, we need to go back to the beginning. You actually grew up in Malaysia, but you're now in Norway. So how did that happen?
Well, when I was 18, I applied for a scholarship and I came to Norway as an exchange student. So I was just, supposed to stay here for 1 year, live with a Norwegian family, go to a Norwegian school, and just be here for a year. But then, things don't always go as planned. And I met the young man who became my husband, a Norwegian, Eyolf Olsen, whom I write about in this book. So that's how I'm here.
Okay. So what made you decide to sign up for a beginner's mushroom class?
Okay, maybe I have to backtrack a bit because this young man whom I talked about, we got married and we were together for 32 years. And one fine day, he passed away very, very suddenly. And I was, in deep sorrow and grieving and was having a very hard time. And of course, all good friends would make suggestions, and somebody, I cannot remember whom, suggested that I sign up for a mushroom course and beginner's mushroom course. And this is something Eyolf, my husband, and I had talked about doing and never got around to. So I thought, hey, why not, And I did that, and what can I say? I was saved by mushrooms.
Yay!
Hence the book.
Yeah. So who offered this course, and what did they teach you?
Yeah. So mushrooming is very organized in Norway, and there are local chapters of what it's called the Fungi and Edible Plant Society. So it's not just mushrooms, it's also edible wild plants. And so I live here in Oslo, and every fall there's always a beginner's class, and there are, intermediate classes and advanced classes and all that. Anyway, so I signed up for the beginner's course, and the beginner's course is very simple. It's I think it's like 6 times, and the first time they show you some mushrooms and you get to smell the mushrooms and you get to learn. Basically, the course teaches you 15 mushrooms, the most poisonous ones and the most popular edible ones. But the second class is already a field trip. So we get out into the forest very early in the trip, in the course. Yeah.
Now, what was it like for you to be in a forest? Because growing up in Malaysia, you wouldn't go outside.
Very good point, Cecily. I mean, yeah. So and the Norwegian forest is very different from a Malaysian jungle. In the Malaysian jungle, you do not, go foraging there because it's full of wild animals and you really don't want to be in a Malaysian jungle. So Norwegian forest is quite different, and we have so many different types of forests too, depending on the trees that they are there. So and even though I'd lived in Norway for a long time and my husband was Norwegian, we were not sort of like the hiking types. So so it was all new to me. um but I really got hooked that first time I was out in the forest.
That's
um
because you found that you could actually use what you learned in your first class the first time you went outside.
Exactly, exactly. And that was amazing. I mean, I've been on very many courses before, and during my work, but this is the first time I went to a course and I learned something and I could apply it immediately. So it was just amazing. It was quite amazing. And okay, the course. There are always two teachers, and when you go out to the forest, because this organization also takes people out on forays, and it's always two leaders, tour leaders, foray leaders, and these foray leaders and the teachers, they all have this exam. They've all passed this exam, this inspector's exam. And the syllabus for that is 150 mushrooms. But maybe you want to talk about that. You said you were interested in that. Yeah.
Well, in fact, here at the Western Pennsylvania Mushroom Club, we give out little ID buttons. I'm going to see if I can hold this up to the camera. This is my 150 button. Yes,
fantastic.
so this means I can identify 150 mushrooms. Now, there's no test, and it's not a credential outside of our club. So it's nothing like being a certified mushroom expert in Norway, which you are. So what do mushroom inspectors in Norway do?
Yeah. So this is an amateur club, right? But we have very close links with the university, and together with the mycologists, they've developed this syllabus, and they also help us run the tests, And so anyway, so when you pass this test and be qualified, mushroom certified mushroom expert, you can take part then in the major activity in the organization, which is to inspect people's mushrooms, mushroom baskets. So basically, for example, here in Oslo this weekend, there are going to be 5 different stations where people can come to, and they're always at the edge of the forest. And so the public will just go into the forest. They can pick their mushrooms. They come out at a designated time, and there will be people there manning the station, normally 2 or 3 people who have passed this exam, and they will check your mushrooms for you. You just give them your basket, they'll look at your mushrooms for you nothing, and they'll tell you if what you have in your basket is edible, and if it's not, they will remove some of the mushrooms.
Now, is it true that if there's one highly toxic mushroom, you have to throw them all out?
That's what we do. Yeah. So all these mushroom inspectors, they follow the same list, and this is the list where all these 150 most common mushrooms in Norway are divided into, and there are 4 categories. Highly toxic, not really edible, and edible mushrooms. And this is something which we talk a lot about, and these mushrooms are always changing categories, but the highly toxic are always highly toxic. And currently there are 8 mushrooms in this highly toxic category. And if you have mixed your mushrooms, and we find one highly toxic mushroom, like the Amanita phalloides, the Amanita virosa, then we would recommend that you throw away everything. That's why we ask people always to separate their mushrooms, separate the different species in little bags, or so they don't mix everything up.
Okay, tell us, what was the test like? Was it scary?
Yeah, of course I was very nervous, and a lot of people fail that test. They always, anyway. So basically, when you take that test, you go in. It's a practical exam. It's not a theoretical exam. It's a practical exam. You go into this room. There's this long buffet, with little paper plates, and on its paper plates are different mushroom species. And then the examiner will bring a plate and you look at the mushroom, you can check it, you can turn it around, you can smell it, and then you tell them what it is. And if it is a poisonous mushroom, you will then have to tell them, how the poison works, how what happens if you ingest this mushroom. And they, of course, they will always ask you about the most toxic ones. And if you don't if you are not able to identify one of the toxic ones, even though it's one of the first mushrooms you are given, you are just sent out of the room. You don't have to continue the rest of the exam.
Wow.
So
did they do anything to confuse you, like mix mushrooms?
sometimes they do, because basically what they're doing is preparing you for that table, when that station where at the edge of the forest, where you would be the one checking other people's mushrooms, right? And and as you know, there are some mushrooms that look alike, not always dangerous look-alikes, but two mushrooms which look alike. Very often they will give you what we call the winter chanterelle and the jelly baby. They have the same type of color, and they would and then you have to tell them, there are actually two species here, not one on this plate. But they're not out to, they don't go out to try to sort of trick you or make things difficult. Basically, they're just trying to simulate the situation, that the inspection situation, when you would then be on the other side of the table and you would have to identify and help people check their mushrooms.
Okay, did you have to know the Latin names for this test?
Thank God, no. So just the popular names. But of course, in my book, I discovered after a while that it is very smart to know the scientific names, because especially if you're going out of the country, and if you are talking to other people, or if you're looking up something on the internet, so and there are people who in the society which are very well versed in mycology Latin, so yeah, so I found that fun after a while. But in the beginning, I was very happy that that we did not have to know the scientific name too.
Okay, well, let's talk about Gary Lincoff.
Yeah.
Since you came to this country and you met him,
Yeah.
tell us, what was it like to go on one of his walks in Central Park?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I've met him. I knew some people in the New York Mycological Society. They had a dinner. I was there. I met him, and he was very kind, and he invited me to go foraging with him, and in Central Park. I don't know, maybe it was like the next day or something like that. So anyway, it was very private, just a few of us, and he just came out of his apartment, and we went foraging, and it was like it was amazing, because he knew that park very, very well. He knew where to go, and he would, of course, not only tell, he had a running commentary. You're walking and he would be pointing here and pointing there and telling you not only about the mushrooms, but also about the different plants, and we found stuff, and then we'll tell you about things that have not that would appear later, or things that had appeared earlier. So he knew that very well. Yeah.
Well, tell us about the time you were confronted by a park ranger. What happened?
Yeah, so we were in Central Park, and there are park rangers in Central Park, and you're actually not allowed to forage in Central Park. But this guy came up to us, and he saw, we had baskets, right? So he asked, what is it that you have in your basket? And of course, Gary just told him the different mushrooms we had and what you could use them for and things like that. And anyway, this park ranger just smiled and said, okay, I've done my duty, and he just left us. But I hear that they are not so nice these days, that now actually you could get a fine if you forage in Central Park, which is not nice for for people who are interested in it, because the New York Mycological Society actually has a scientific project in Central Park where they record the different types of mushrooms that they find, and they have found a lot, several hundred species in Central Park itself.
Okay, now you also had an experience with Gary at the Telluride Festival in Colorado, and
Yeah.
you found something and he got excited. What was that?
Well, yeah, I was very lucky. I went to the Telluride Mushroom Festival, which is crazy, as those of you who have been there would know. And so it was on one of these forays. I was resting. We had walked a lot, picked a lot of different things. Gary had told us about, everything we had found. And I was resting, and then suddenly I saw what looked like a bolete, so I thought it was just a normal bolete, so I just picked it, and I thought it looked a bit strange. It didn't look like what boletes normally look like, king boletes, and Gary, I showed it to Gary, and he just, screamed and did a little dance, and so everybody was interested in this. And there were, scientific people with us too, and I found two, and they managed to convince me to donate one of them, for science. And so they took it, and they were not sure what it was. And the reason why everybody was excited was, okay, number one, they were like, is this a new species? So they asked me, what's your name? I didn't know why they wanted my name. They said, oh, if it's a new species, well, it could be named after you. I said, oh, wow. And it turned out that this was Barossi. So it's not a new species. It's just never been found so high up in the Colorado mountains before. So it was still, it was still a historic moment, a mycologically historic moment. And Gary talked about it at the end of the festival when he gave his summary of the highlights of the Telluride Mushroom Festival that year. So
very exciting. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
So now you do a lot of cooking of
Yes,
mushrooms and eating, and we already know from your book that your favorite is the morel.
Yes.
But what are some of your other favorites, and what's the best way to cook them?
Well, I'm very practical, so it depends on what I find. But one, I really love the agaricus, the various species of agaricus that you can find. It's because I live in a city. I don't really have to go into the forest. I can just go into the park next to where I live and just pick my dinner. So that's easy. And of course the in my mind, the best agaricus is the Augustus, the prince. Do you have that where you are?
I don't know.
I'll
have to find out.
Okay. Agaricus Augustus. We call, the prince. And that is really special. But otherwise, the normal agaricus, they're just so much better than what you find in the shop, in the supermarket. What do I like to do? Well, different things. But here in Norway, in Mushroom Society, I'm not sure whether you do that. We do not, when we fry the mushrooms, we do not put the butter in immediately, the fat in immediately. We try to get the liquid, whatever liquid there is in the mushroom, to evaporate first before we put the fat in. Do you do that?
We should, because otherwise you just end up boiling them.
Exactly. So actually, very low heat, and you can see this liquid coming out immediately. And only when it's gone, then you put in the fat, and then you can sort of fry it up, and then you can get little crispy edges, and it will caramelize. And so basically, you just need time. But yeah, in my book, I have some recipes there. Also, because I was fascinated by how you could use mushrooms not only as a savory, but also as a dessert. we are just used to thinking about mushrooms as, you know, something you put salt and pepper on, but some mushrooms are very fruity in taste. And so I've got a chanterelle ice cream recipe with crystallized chanterelles, baby chanterelles, you know, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can make a panna cotta, you know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just for our viewers, the book is full of recipes, not strict recipes, just mainly I would call it ideas, all the different things you can do.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a question here. We've had a really dry spell and everybody's complaining. And you had a funny story in your book about a guy who actually was driving buckets into the woods to water the mushrooms. So
Yeah.
why was he doing that?
Well, he was doing that because he had a girlfriend, and she came from a part of Norway that did not have these mushrooms. These were the Colorsive gambosa, which I don't think you have, because Gary actually asked me for them, and I dried them and took them with me to New York and gave it to him. And these are the very, very early mushrooms. In England, they call them St. George's mushrooms. So they come out very early. And so this young man, he was trying to make an impression on the young lady who had never seen these mushrooms before. He spotted these mushrooms, but in very, very small, you know, baby ones. Like the week before she came, it was very dry. So he was action oriented. So he drove buckets of water to the forest edge and took took the buckets into the forest, you know, to water these mushrooms so that they would be, you know, nice and big and juicy by the time this young lady came to visit, you know, at the end of the week. And they ended up getting married.
Okay, so it was worth it. Yay.
Yeah.
Okay, does your club do anything with microscopes?
Yes, we do. Actually, this club is very active. We have microscope like courses, clinics, workshops. There are a lot of people who are into handicraft. You know, they'll dye mushrooms, dye wool and yarn, silk and linen with mushrooms. And in fact, yeah, I forgot. You know, when I was talking just now about the inspection of mushrooms, we now also have a digital mushroom inspection. So and this is an app, you know, that the public can download, but there's a mushroom inspector at the other end of the app. So it's not an app, you know, that you can use 24/7. It's an app that is manned, you know, a woman, you know, by a mushroom inspector at the other end at the same times where when we would have these mushroom inspections at the edge of the forest. And basically, the whole idea of the app is we are not going to identify all the mushrooms in the forest. We'll just identify 20 mushrooms, like the most common mushrooms, and definitely the most poisonous ones, and the ones which everybody picks, you know, pick. And so that is very, very popular, and that really has led to a lot more people coming to the society, because not everybody can meet up, you know, at that designated time and go picking mushrooms and getting them checked, you know, by these at these 5 stations, you know, during the weekend. So that is something we are very proud of. But anyway, yeah, cooking, we have got cooking classes. And in the winter, we try to have a lot of activities too, so that it's not just something that happens every fall. So in the winter time, we would have like cooking with dried mushrooms, or we'll have movie nights, you know, mushroom movies, things like that, or talks. Yeah.
Now, what about cultivation? Do your members grow their own mushrooms?
Some people do, and we have had courses dealing with that topic too. Yeah, I tried. I was not successful.
Yeah, I did it once. It's too messy for me. I'll just find them.
Yeah. But it was fun to try it. Yeah. You have to be so exact. You have to be so, you know, super clean, and everything needs to be right. You know, it didn't work for me. But some other people in that course got some mushrooms out of their little buckets. Yeah.
Okay. How do the mushroom species and names in Norway compare to here? Are there a lot of similar ones or not? Do you find
You
the
mean
same? Well, do you
the
find the
popular?
same? Yeah, do you find the same mushrooms over there that you find here? And do you call them the same thing?
Well, definitely. Well, the scientific names are the same,
Right.
right? The scientific names are the same no matter where you go. Uh, but you would have, but you wouldn't have, the same species both here and where you are. So it's always nice to sort of go somewhere and see and pick new mushrooms. Um, so this society in Norway is affiliated to to several societies in the Mediterranean. So we go there at the end of our season. We go there because it's the season is longer, and we like to go foraging with them. And there they would have other mushrooms, like the Amanita caesaria, which is like super good to eat, but we don't have it here. So it's always nice to mushroom abroad, because then you would find some new species that you're not used to. Yeah.
When did you realize that you were no longer an amateur, but a hopeless mushroom freak?
I think it was that time when I lost my secret spot. We all have secret spots, and we think of them as our own. And this was a spot, where I found my Agaricus augustus, the prince. My top Agaricus. And I found so many that day. I couldn't bring them home. So I had to call a friend who had a car. So he came with this car, and we filled it with this mushroom, and he drove me home. And he thought this was so crazy because, of course, the whole car just smelled of this. I mean, it smells wonderful. Anyway, he then met someone, and he told someone about this spot. And when I heard about this, I was just horrified that he would even do something like that. I thought he was, I thought he knew. You're not supposed to tell anybody. So anyway, I lost my spot, but I discovered that I was a hopeless mushroom addict.
Yeah. And didn't you actually not go to somebody's wedding because it interfered with the mushroom thing?
Yeah, so I've done silly things like that. Yes, I have. I'm not always forgiven.
Okay, well, I appreciate your time, and I just wonder if you have anything else you'd like to tell us before we wrap it up.
No, I think it's great that you have, an annual Gary Lincoff, the lecture, Foray. I'm very, very pleased that you asked me to join you. My book is out there. I'm in contact with lots of readers. So if anybody has read it and want to contact me, I'm on, all social media platforms.
Okay, here's the book. Here's the book.
Yes.
There it is.
So yeah, read the book, contact me. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Cecily.
This is the 20th annual Gary Lincoff Foray, and this is the Western Pennsylvania Mushroom Club. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.